So you're just gonna take this, run on out. So a quick recap: shadow side, drop puddles on the wall, take the big bomb out, dodge the little balls that spawn on you. Straightforward. Fire side, soak the meteor, soak the volcanoes, dodge the line attack. So whoever gets targeted with the line attack, just take it off to the side, point it at the wall. It's phase one is fairly straightforward, but let me pause, give folks a chance to jump in. Okay. Go ahead.
That line is that like on sausage? People have to soak it. Is it the
No,
same?
no, it's just one person will be hit, and that person gets marked to take increased fire damage. So you don't want anyone else in it. But the mechanics, like type, the line size, etc., is the same as Dasagni. So it's not. That's the one thing on the fire side that's not a soak.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Okay. So phase two basically combines a lot of the elements from phase one. So the first two adds, there's a shadow side and a fire side. The third amalgamation is a shadow flame amalgamation. That's going to be a theme in the raid here. So there's a couple changes. So just like shadow side has to dodge balls, fire side has to soak tornadoes. In phase two, you have to soak tornadoes and then dodge balls. So an example, a little volcano will come out. A ranged player will want to hear and soak it. And then balls of shadow that look the same as they did in phase one will converge on where that player just soaked. So it's go soak the thing so the raid doesn't die, and then dodge the balls that are going to collapse on you. So it's go to point, dodge point, go to point, dodge point. So those spawn periodically around the boss. Ranged will have to soak, healers will have to soak, melee will have to soak. It's just, if you see one, go stand in it. We don't want to over soak naturally. We'll do our usual first to arrive. You're the person who's planting. The important thing is that even if you're not soaking, the shadow balls can still hit you. So if you're the person that's soaking, get there, stay there. But if you're not soaking, just be wary of the balls that are converging. So that's part number one. Part number two, there's a tornado mechanic that spawns a big fire tornado that then spins and slowly grows. These do dissipate eventually, or at least have a maximum conal or like a radial distance that they'll travel. So it's super important that we get these all the way out to the side. So if you get targeted with a fire tornado, scoot to the wall. You're gonna do less damage. It's okay. The moral of the raid is live, and like make your lives easy. There's a couple true DPS races. This is not one of them. So take the tornado out to the wall, dodge the tornado as you're coming back in, and the tornado just hangs out over there. So we'll be in the middle of the room doing our stuff, soaking the puddles. Tornadoes will be along the edge of the room. You don't have to go necessarily to the front wall or the right wall. That's just where the pictures are here. The last big difference in this phase is the tank mechanics interact with the raid. So tanks, you guys are trading back and forth for damage burst and the vulnerability. But both of those in this phase are big line attacks. So like you guys will have your own little subsection of the room, and the raid can't be over there. That's not for you guys to manage. Like we'll tell people where you're going to be, and then people shouldn't be behind you. So it combines some of the elements from P1, but it puts them together basically. So tornadoes out, soak and dodge, avoid the tank line. That's heroic. Let me pause. Okay. Or I guess a little bit more. So there's also, again, Shadow Flame. So the meteor mechanic and the balls mechanic again combine. So the whole raid will collapse and soak a meteor, like a fire meteor, and then from where you soaked, purple balls will spawn that move outward. So this will be a moment where we'll put a Warlock Gateway down, and everyone will stand in, and then we'll all take the gateway together, and then just turn our heads around and make sure that we're dodging the balls. Super straightforward. So it successfully combines all of the parts of P1 into 2 distinct mechanics. I believe that the fire vulnerability from the line attack also gets applied if you get hit by one of these purple balls, or Shadow Flame vulnerability. So dodge the balls. But that's pretty much it. So this fight does have a stack and gate moment. It's imperative that we get everyone in, because this damage distribution will really hurt if we are missing folks. But we have the gateway tech to solve it. On Mythic, the big difference is you have to find a buddy. So I don't know if everyone here progged N'Zoth back in the day, but you'll basically have a friend that you're clearing with. And I know that there were weak auras that would like pick a person that you could clear with and you would handle through it. This is just, we're going to pre-assign who's clearing with who. So there will be a big ol' spreadsheet and you'll be in the note. So there will be 8 pairs that will just touch each other in the middle. And then there will be 1 person on each side that's designated to go hug the other tank. So the tanks are never changing sides, but everyone else will have to converge in the middle, except for our 2 people, most likely hunters with their OP mobility, will be hugging the other tank. So basically at the start of the fight, your color is set. You have to clear your color before Phase 2 starts. And Phase 2 starts when either boss hits 50%. So this will be a like damage balance exercise. If you have a debuff up when the bosses hit 50%, you die and you do pulsing damage to the raid. So we have to clear, and it'll just be getting comfortable with when that moment is to go clear in the fight. So we'll see exactly where the prevailing strat is, but for now, that's the only change from a Mythic perspective. And again, we won't have like a skull-only lane, but we'll put a bunch of markers down, and ideally that's where you go meet your friend. We'll try and keep it as organized as we can. Any questions on any of Amalgamation here?
What do I do if my partner is Zarnik?
I guess grip him. I guess you gotta grip him. But yes, it's just find your friend. I believe we'll only have to do this once. I believe they don't get reapplied, but that was an open question coming out of PTR testing, and it's ambiguous in the Dungeon Journal. So we will see. We might have to do multiple clears in P1. Okay. Up next, we are talking about Forgotten Experiment. Forgotten Experiment is a council-style boss without the council mechanic, at least until Mythic. Each boss alone has a fairly simple set of mechanics. So the first boss comes down and has a Fenrir-style jump, like Fenrir from Halls of Valor, where he'll target 3 people. He'll jump to those people and do a little AoE. I think this can go up to 4. I think the number of people increases, but basically we'll make either a square or a triangle away from the raid, and the boss will go do his jump, jump, jump thing. You just don't want to be with your friends. But things that clear bleeds, bops, dwarf racials, all that fun will be super strong on this fight, because the dot that he puts on you, just like Fenrir, slaps pretty hard. But it does fade, which is good. So we'll have raid markers down. You just run out to your assigned marker. My goal is to track down a weak aura before we pull this on Mythic that will put people places, but just generally so far, I haven't seen anything that's easily customizable. Worst case, we build it ourselves. But effectively, that's the biggest piece. There's also a fall-off damage mechanic where the boss will do a roar. The whole rest of the whole raid will just move away from him, and you take fall-off damage. P1 is fairly easy. Tanks, you guys have a stacking, I think, damage taken / dot on you. You can drop it by touching each other. So you'll each have it, and you can reset your stacks by bumping into each other. But when you do that, it does a bunch of damage to the raid. So we don't want to overlap it with the jump or with the roar. It's just find the moment where the raid is healthy, touch, and clear. And we'll get a sense for exactly what that dance looks like. I think on Heroic, it's going to just be clear when it gets uncomfortable, and we'll be fine. On Mythic, I think it'll be more scripted, and we'll aim to put that in the healing note, like when you guys are going to clear. But that's the first boss. Uniquely, this is not a Lust on Pull boss. This is one of the few no Lust on Pull bosses of the expansion so far. The twist on Mythic is that instead of each boss spawning one after the other, on Mythic, when you bring one boss to 50%, the next one spawns. So you will have multiple bosses active at a time. So that's the first boss. Second boss, again, fairly straightforward as a standalone. There's a lot going on when there's multiples up. So this boss will create amping up damage effects called Unstable Essence on someone. This one's going to be all about healer discipline. When you dispel someone with this debuff, it jumps to a new person and resets its stacks, but it also spawns an ad that needs to be killed before it finishes a cast. So the discipline of P2 of this phase will be all about don't dispel people too early, and raid make sure we're swapping and doing what we need to do. The longer this boss is alive, the more of these debuffs exist. So you can have up to, I think, 5. And that you don't want to go above that. So later into the fight, it'll be everyone moves out together and we MD the debuffs. So that we have everything in one spot and we can just nuke it down with AoE. But basically it's move to the side, get dispelled, because it puts a big circle around you when you get dispelled. So you don't want to dispel people in the raid, because then the whole raid has to move. Go to the side, get dispelled, whole raid does damage to the thing, you're back on the boss. The prevailing strat seems to be Lust this phase, because these debuffs don't go away in P3. However many debuffs you get, basically however long this boss is alive, the harder P3 will be. So nothing from P1 carries over, this guy, but the amount of time that this guy's up dictates how hard P3 is. So this is why you do not Lust on Pull, and sort of how you approach this guy. Questions on either P1 or P2 so far?
It sounds like one of the things I was saying was later in this phase.
Yeah.
I was saying people were stacking in the middle for the dispel and then mass dispelling, and then that would clump all the ads and then just kill them all instead of.
Yes. Yeah, so we wouldn't do single dispels later into the phase as we get up there. And so I might have said that. I might not have, though. But yes, we would do MD and then burn them all, nuke them all together.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have to kind of figure out the balance for that. I don't know if healers will be comfortable enough being able to MD on MD's cooldown, or if we'll need to do single dispels in between, or how that will work. But it's all going to be about dispel discipline in this phase, and people using their defensives well so that your healers aren't having a panic attack while we're managing that effect. The only other thing is he makes swirls on the ground. Dodge the swirls. So P2 is easy, except for the longer the boss is alive, the more overall damage we will take and the more debuffs we have to deal with. So that is this guy. The last boss has a breath mechanic. It goes in a very predictable fixed order. He goes down the middle, He goes down the right side. He goes down the left side. So it's down and back. It's 1, 2, 3. Just don't stand in the beam. Um, we continue to have to deal with however many dispels are out there. So we'll have a marker down that'll be where people go to get dispelled. They go there, call for a dispel, or we'll go there and call for an MD, and then you come back to the raid. But the whole raid continues to stack together, except for when the boss casts Disintegrate. This works a lot like the Disintegrate cast on the third boss of Azure Vaults, where you just have to not be stacked with your friends. It's like a 5-yard thing. However, this boss's Disintegrate hits multiple people at a time, so our DPS will kind of have to do a 5-yard spread just prior to Disintegrate happening, stay spread for the Disintegrate, and then collapse back in. The last thing that's going on in this mechanic, or in this phase, is there's a Halandrus style ball bouncing mechanic with kind of the same stakes. So you touch a thing, it bounces backwards, but it's always moving towards the boss. On Heroic, you can bounce this as many times as you want. On Mythic, you get a 20-second internal cooldown on when you can bounce the ball. So the whole raid will have to be focused on bouncing these. If one touches the boss, he gets a shield for 10% of his max health. So we'll likely have to establish a soak order on Mythic, but because there's no penalty for having multiple people bounce it on normal and heroic, we won't have to cross that bridge until we get there. But it's just play goalie, right? And everyone will have to play goalie, not just one or two people. Dodge the deep breaths, handle the dispels, spread for the disintegrate. So you can kind of see how the amount of time that we're in P2 kind of directly makes this harder. If we're also always having to swap to a bunch of ads and burn them down before we're back on the boss, this phase gets a lot longer. There are going to be more balls that we have to bounce. It just builds on itself. Let me pause there. Questions, comments, thoughts, theories?
Are we using like big raid CDs for the tank clear? Or are we trying to, because it lasts for 20 seconds, which means that we're probably going to get 10 stacks on one tank plus one in order to clear.
Yeah.
But if we hold it longer, is that the plan, to like use raid CDs to survive the initial hit and heal the dot?
Yes. Yeah, there's not really anything else to use those raid cooldowns on in P1 other than Bellowing Roar, which if we're moving out, shouldn't be an issue. My understanding is that only the tank mechanic in P1 has the touching effect. The other bosses have different tank mechanics for you guys are just trading taunts, is my understanding. So in P1, we'll be using DRs, big throughput cooldowns for when those clears are.
In the dungeon journal, all of them are listed with infused strikes.
It's the same. Okay, so it's the same one. So then yes, so that'll be our big raid cooldown moment. The rest of this is basically all single target healing because the damage from these ads is single target. The damage from the dot is predictable on set players, and the damage from bouncing the ball will be clear, as well as disintegrate. So yes, most of our big raid cooldowns will be allocated to dealing with the tank mechanic, as most everything else is going to kind of tickle. Good question. Okay. On Mythic, the kill order is still kind of up in the air. On Heroic, we lost to P2 and you burn the second guy. On Mythic, if you do that, you'll have all three active at once, potentially, if you don't cleave the first guy down first or second. So there's the exact ordering strat is kind of TBD. I could see this boss being the fourth boss killed, not the second boss killed, depending on which wing you're headed to. I think Assault is going to be a lot easier. So we'll keep an ear to the ground as those strats coalesce. But I think once the kill order becomes clear, the boss itself is fairly straightforward. Okay. Up next is Rashok. Um, I'm doing these a little out of order because Assault has a lot going on. Rashok does not. So Rashok's whole big thing is he does a slam. When he does a slam, he leaves behind a big ol' fire lava gout thing. You don't want to go back into that gout. It does a ton of damage, and you can't slam where you slammed previously. So this is a room management fight. We're going to drop a slam in a corner, drop a slam next to that slam, and just slowly move our way around the room. When the boss does a slam, from the slam emanate little lava waves that you dodge. These 2-shot, and knockback. So please avoid them. When he slams, all of the magma gouts unleash lava waves. So the longer that the fight goes on, the more slam/lava waves there are, the more things there are to dodge. So this is one where being consistent with your damage is very helpful. On Mythic, this gets a bit more complicated where lined up with each slam will be these 2 little swirls that spawn. These swirls, if unaddressed, put a big heal absorb on the raid. But if you put a slam on top of one of them, it cancels that one out. So basically, you lose a lot of agency on how you control the room on Mythic. The heal absorb, if we get 2 stacks, is going to be really hard to heal because he's also doing ticking damage. He's also doing a lot of other things. So it becomes important that whoever gets targeted with the slam can quickly assess which of the 2 is the right place to go, and we'll be aiming to call that out. Goes there, puts the slam there, and then comes back to the raid. Everything else still applies. So on heroic, normal and heroic, we really get to control and make it easy for ourselves. On Mythic, if he puts 2 in a bad spot, we're kind of SOL. We're going to have to just pick the lesser of 2 evils. So that is the core mechanic here. From a incremental standpoint, he will also spawn, just like the second boss that we talked through, little volcanoes, but these are shadow flame rifts that need to be soaked. So again, you just stand in it and then go. We'll have a 10-person rotation, like soak group 1, soak group 2, because you can't soak back to back. So a 20-second internal cooldown. So while you're dodging lava waves, healing through the heal absorb, doing all that, half the raid will be getting hit by that soak mechanic. So it's just making sure that we're aware which group is which and keeping our eye on those guys. But again, as we move around the room, these will move with us. But they're like a reddish, purplish color in contrast to the big orange things. On Mythic, single missed soak is a raid death. So think Fate Scribe, right? If one person missed their soak on Fate Scribe, it just auto kills everyone. It's the same thing for Rashok. So we just have to be very with it on our soaking. So we'll pre-assign 2 soak groups, and everyone will have to get used to sort of the general area of the raid that they have to cover. But on Mythic, 1 miss soak is a wipe. So it's just getting comfy with that dance. Additionally, there's a tank soak. So little soaks, right? Little soaks, gotta soak them. There's another big soak for the tanks. So the tank soak will happen. The whole raid has to soak it, similar to the little soaks. However, unlike historical tank slams, it's not like not standing in the tank slam means you don't split the damage. You take way more damage if you're not in the tank slam. So he slams the tank, the group splits the damage, Anyone who didn't split to the damage takes a bigger hit of damage. So be in the tank slam. And then on Mythic, when he does the tank slam, you have an Anduin style P3 clear mechanic where everyone has a dot and you dump it into the center of the room, and when you touch, it clears your dot, but it does a big tick of damage to the raid. Unlike Anduin, it's okay if we're on top of each other when this is happening. It's not like you can't touch your friends as well. So that's a little easier. But it's just a balance when you're also dodging lava waves, also soaking other pools. It seems like the prevailing strat is just pop a big DR like a Spirit Link or an Aura Mastery and just shotgun the clears, but we'll have to kind of see what the final damage looks like. So there's this sort of accordion style play where we're on sort of this outer circle of the room, and then we move to the middle for the tank slam. We're on the outer circle of the room, we move to the middle for the tank slam. There's a further mechanic, and this is very tank relevant, is if the boss reaches 100 energy, we die. So you can, just like, actually not just like Kurog, when he's getting close to 100 energy, we bring him to the middle of the room, and he starts draining his energy to repower his elemental conduits. This is kind of the core intermission mechanic. My understanding is he's still attackable. We can still whack him during this time, but each time we drain him, he does more damage incrementally, and he also just does more damage over the course of the fight. Each time he does a slam, the damage from slam to the raid is higher. So this one is truly a DPS race. Do the soaks, slap the boss, and just burn, burn, burn. On Mythic, it's important that we get comfortable with the timing, because he'll do a slam, so on Mythic, remember, we have the heal absorbs. The heal absorbs will go out before the slam happens. We have to let the slam go through so that it can turn off one of the two heal absorbs before we bring him to the middle. So you only transition after a slam. If you bring him to the middle before he slams, both heal absorbs go off. It's technically not an immediate wipe, but it's going to be really hard for our healers to recover unless the whole raid is popping like both health stone and health pot. So we'll kind of have to get a sense for that. But again, it's just take him to the center, and he starts draining his energy. Once he reaches 0 again, he does more damage, and we move on. There's also a bait mechanic on top of everything else. He'll do a big cone attack, and I mean big. If it's not facing the wall, it takes up like half the room. It's a giant cone. So before this cone, we'll bait it to the wall, and it's just getting used to that dance. So there's a lot of raid movement here. There's a lot of personal responsibility on whoever gets the slam, and there's a lot of managing your own personal position, dodging lava waves, baiting the cone, being in the tank slam, being in your personal soak. This is a big movement fight that's going to be all about maximizing our damage. It should be a lot of fun. Any questions on Rashok? Rashik?
With the tank slams, it's the flaming slash and the earth and crush. Do they come out at different times? Like, do you know the timing on that? Because they both do a crazy amount of damage.
I think they will. They shouldn't ever overlap, is my understanding. My understanding is you'll have an earth tank and a flame tank, and you shouldn't have to trade.
Is that kind of like a guardian soak, or is it like completely separate times?
Not like. My understanding is only one thing has to be soaked. If there's like an initial hit and then a secondary hit, this only one of the two needs to be soaked. So like that soak rotation should only be one of the two mechanics. And I can pull up the journal in the background to double check as well. But in the near term, while we're grabbing that, any other questions?
The only reason I asked about the tank thing is because it looked like Agrimar, because you get debuffed heavily against the other one.
Yeah. So I think charged smash is the thing that needs to be soaked. For Rashok. I don't think you have to soak the other two tank things, the fire.
So yeah, so we have to figure out. Okay, all I wanted to know is if external, because 2.9 million physical damage by ourselves is a lot.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so I think his other two abilities, Cord, are combos, like combo style, where you guys will do like live trades back and forth. So you do fire and earth. You don't want to get hit by the same one twice. So I think it's
Agrimar, except not splitting.
Not splitting, yes. Agrivar, but not splitting. And then there's a separate tank mechanic where everyone has to be in it on top of you guys.
Yeah, that was mostly my question, was like with the Guardian thing where like both of the hits are coming out and it's just like a swap between the tanks very fast.
Thankfully, no. Like they'll be swapping, but those aren't AoE. The thing that's AoE does not is not part of that series. Yeah. Good questions. The last thing on Mythic, the boss starts with a timer. Or it starts with a debuff where he can't trigger the conduit in the middle to drain his energy. The last mechanic with the slams is if he's in one of the pools spawned by the slams, he gains energy really, really quickly. So on Mythic, if he's in at the slams for any amount of time, it's basically a wipe because we won't be able to drain him in time, and he'll hit 100 energy and he'll kill us. So the one thing with the slams is we don't want to slam behind where we've slammed before unless we absolutely have to. And tanks, we might have to do some like quick geometry to enable him, like swing him wide so that he doesn't jump through a previous thing. So we don't want him to jump through the middle, and we don't want him to jump through an old magma tornado thing. Or I think they're called living lava pools to be precise. But this boss has like 3 core mechanics: soaks and slams, and getting the right balance of those two while dodging all the stuff that results from them is the big Jenga board. Okay. Zakali Assault. I'm gonna keep us moving here just in the interest of time. Zakali Assault is another fight that has a lot going on. There are a lot of, like, if you look at the dungeon journal for this, you're gonna go, what the fuck am I looking at? Basically, it's a 3-phase fight. There's a phase 0 where you hit the boss and the boss does a frontal cone. Don't get hit by the frontal cone. We get to play Castle Siege here, or Castle Defense, if you will. Every time he does a frontal cone, he creates rubble. You can pick up the rubble and keep it for a minute. You get an extra action button. Just hang on to the rubble. We'll then split the raid up into 2 groups. So we start in this middle platform, and then half the raid goes left, half the raid goes right. And while you're on these side platforms, there are ads that are climbing up the walls. You can use your extra action button if you're holding rubble to knock them off so that they don't jump up and you don't have to kill them. So you can knock off wall climbers, you can knock off like all of the different types of ads, but I think it's not going to be that calculated. I think it's going to be, if you see an ad that you can knock off, knock it off. I think the rocks are going to be a pretty scarce resource. But there might be a strat where you like pool a bunch of rocks and then drop them all at once so that you can skip a whole ad set and tunnel into the boss. So while we're on each platform, there's a couple mechanics. There are wall climbers, which don't have an initial aggro table. They'll climb up the wall, and they'll run towards the door. If they reach the door, the raid takes 1 billion damage and you die. So we just need to make sure that we're picking those up, and it's as simple as like hitting them with an ice lance or a moonfire or anything at all to bring them into your bring them onto an aggro table, so they stop running. They don't have to be slowed or CC'd or anything. It's just touch them. There are also guards. Guards will charge a frontal attack at someone. If you get that frontal attack, just point it away from the group. There's also a standard dodge mechanic where you'll get a swirly on you, bring it out of the raid. The boss will throw a spear. A couple seconds later, that spear will erupt. So it's take the thing out. Everyone else dodges, and then you dodge the thing that you just got hit by getting back into the group. So it's the dodge. And those are the 3 types of simple adds. So there's spear guys, spearmen, climbers, which are just do generic white damage after you tag them, and the guards, which do the frontal attack. The whole time we're on this phase, and we're in this phase, and each group is fighting adds, the boss jumps back and forth between platforms, and this phase continues until the boss gets to 15%. So this fight might seem like it's all about cleave, go, but we want to try and funnel as much damage as we can into the boss so that we spend as little time in this phase as possible. But the whole time we're doing all the dodging. We're picking up rubble because he still does his frontal cone attack to whichever tank or whichever platform he's on. So whichever platform the boss is on gets rubble to make less adds. Whichever platform he's not on, you guys are just dealing with adds. And he just jumps back and forth on a timer. The last add type is this Magma Mystic. The Magma Mystic doesn't climb, so you can't knock it off. He just jumps up with his big, thick thighs. And as soon as he jumps up, he puts a big shield on himself and just channels damage on the raid. So it's break the shield, interrupt the guy. So it's basically save your cooldowns for either the boss or Magma Mystic spawns. So each side is going to have to be super aware of those Magma Mystic spawns and tunneling into those. But basically, it's just rinse and repeat. 4 types of ads, 1 boss, a lot of things to hit, but just managing through the chaos and making sure you're putting damage in the right place. And then passively cleaving down the rest of the stuff. There's, on Mythic, there's the added fun of a bird. The bird is not attackable. You don't have to hit the bird. But the bird will pull you to the edge periodically. Each side will have to deal with a pull, like a winds mechanic. And the bird will also make phoenixes that self-res. So he just makes AoE fodder, and that needs to be CC'd and handled. So we'll have set rotations for that. It's unclear if these are they respawn forever or they respawn once. So the strategy might be just bring them into your cleave group, cleave them down, ignore them. And the strategy might be bait them to the side, put them in a ring and a root, and ignore them. It's unclear if they function like Sun King, where they never go away, or if they function like a res once boss mechanic. So we'll keep an eye on that and adjust strat accordingly. But just the only difference is on Mythic, there's a bird, and that's P1. Well, phase 0, I'm calling this phase 0 when we're just hitting the boss at the start for 20 seconds. So we'll lust and burn there. And then we'll split to sides and do our thing. And then once the boss reaches 15%, he runs to the center, kills his bird, RIP bird, and heals himself for 10%. So he has 25% health when he phases. He'll still do his frontal. And when he does his frontal, he'll not only do a cone to the tanks, but he'll also put a little fire circle on everyone in the group. So you spread those out so that you're not stacking and soaking on and hitting each other. So when he does the tank slam, the whole raid has to spread 5 or 7 yards. And then you collapse back in. There's another mechanic where you have to soak a line. He'll basically set up a leap at the door. If the door ever takes damage, Rashok, who's inside the door, will kill us. So we don't want to do that. So we'll have 2 groups of 10 who will like all be assigned to soak that frontal. On heroic, you get a thing that increases your damage taken by it. So it's groups 1 and 2 will do it. Groups 3 and 4 will do it, but we just have to make sure that we soak. If we miss a soak, it is a wipe, period. Like, if the door damage occurs, we die. So it's going to be super important that people are aware of when it's their turn to soak and paying attention to callouts and getting there. But the assault seems like it's got a lot going on, but I think this fight will actually be pretty intuitive once we get into it.
For Mythic, he transitions at 15% and then he heals back to 25%.
Correct. Yes. So I think he heals both on heroic and mythic. It's just that on mythic the bird actually does shit other than just like create swirlies on the ground. But yes, so he phases at 15, heals back up, you're hitting him for 25. Okay. Any other Zakali questions, comments? Cool. Up next is Skarn. Skarn is a cool looking fight. This is all about space management. So it's a trap fight. So like if you look at the room, there's this tessellating pattern. Each of these little scales has a trap in the middle of it. The boss will activate traps, and he does it in a pretty predictable pattern. He activates the 2 closest traps to him. So it's like reverse Broodkeeper. Instead of blowing up the 2 closest eggs, the boss is activating the 2 closest traps. So you take the boss to the edge, you bait the traps in a predictable way so that there aren't traps in the middle of the room. Basic. The boss also has a slowly accruing energy bar. When the bar fills up, he activates the 3 nearest statues, so it's hard to see on the raid plan, but there's like these big dragon head statues around the room. There's 6 in total. When he reaches 100 energy, he activates them, and they cover a shit ton of the room. I think that this cone, like visually, should be bigger, but I didn't want to make it impossible to read the raid plan. I think it goes like to the center-ish of the room. So if you draw a straight line here, everything up here would be fire. So it's like a gateway moment. We'll put a gateway down when he's close to 100 energy to the far side of the room. We'll position so that we know which dragons he's going to activate, and then boom, we'll take the gateway. He also does a knockback periodically. The edge looks like it's on fire, but it's not. You can just get knocked into it, and it's an invisible wall. So just get knocked toward the edge. It's easy. Don't get knocked into a trap. The traps hurt. There's an additional mechanic where the boss will also spawn golems. The golems will run around and turn on traps, random traps. So you want to kill these so that you don't have traps where you want to go later. When you kill, so they can be stunned, they can be slowed, they can do all this stuff. On Mythic, they become CC immune, I believe, at 50%. So it's like slow cleave them, and then we'll have a hard raid swap moment where everyone hits the golems. When you kill the golems, they're lootable. They're only lootable one time. So like one person can loot one golem. When you loot the golem, you get an item that gives you an extra action button that lets you run to a trap and deactivate it. So if the golem activates a random trap, it's not the end of the world. We can turn that trap off. But more likely, because it's a space management fight, we'll want to go turn off traps that the boss activated earlier so that we don't run out of room. So it's just, this is strictly a trap management fight. So you kill a golem, loot a golem, get an extra action button, go to a trap, use your extra action button, and it turns the trap off. The boss can later turn it back on, but that's the vibe. Also, so there's a big stacking dot tank mechanic. Sorry, tanks. There's a lot of tank like very specific tank mechanics in this raid. The boss will also put these bombs down, so that does ticking magic damage. The off tank will also have a thing that they have to do, but it's physical mitigation instead of magical mitigation. Where the boss will put these bombs down, that does a bunch of physical damage to you, and also gives you, I think, a physical dot. So it's all about physical mitt if you're off tanking, magical mitt if you're active tanking. The boss spawns the bombs, and if we don't soak all the bombs within 30 seconds, they blow up and kill the raid. So it's basically just make sure that we get them all. We may be able to like bubble soak and turtle soak these, so we may have hunters assigned to clear these if tanks are getting trucked. We'll kind of have to see how folks are tackling it, but we'll aim to set those up if there's a bad overlap for tanks where they can't get out or they don't have cooldowns. But my understanding is that if you don't have a big personal and you touch a bomb as a DPS, you die. So don't touch bombs unless you're supposed to.
It says it does 1 million physical damage if you trigger it.
Yeah, like a lot. So don't touch bombs unless you're supposed to be touching bombs. And tanks, I mean, armor, your physical mitt, all that fun should bring that million to a more manageable number. But it's still going to be I think, invoice coordination potentially with healers to be like soaking, so that they don't bomb you.
How many dropped? Did you say 4?
4 at a time. Yeah, and we have 30 seconds to soak all 4.
It leaves an 8-second debuff.
And how much is the damage taken on the debuff?
It is 136,000 physical damage every 1 second for 8 seconds.
Yeah, it's just it's a physical dot. Yeah.
So it would be almost 300 or 250k damage per second if we overlap 2 of them, which we'll have to do.
Right.
I know I was watching Dratnos do this in testing, and we'll have 3 bops and 3 bubbles. So I feel like this will be like a non-mechanic.
It should
they can
be.
still activate with bop on.
Yeah.
I think you can activate with bop. I think that you can use bop to clear the dot, and I think that you can activate with turtle as well. So we'll have these assigned, but there may be moments where like a turtle person can't get all 3, or we won't have an immune for a set, and tanks might have to jump in. So what might end up happening is active tank with a magic dot also soaks one of the bombs. So we'll have to figure out exactly how that distribution goes, but if we don't soak all the bombs in 30 seconds, they do detonate and kill us. So it's a dance. But yes, I think Holy's spot on. We should have enough immunes in the group to trivialize this. I think if people pop big damage mitt as well, it should be livable. I'm not talking like pop your personal wall. I'm talking like greater invis plus mirror images plus your magic absorb. I think, or your shield should be enough. So we'll have to make sure that we have externals rolling for tanks, but there's a lot of tank damage on this fight because there's not a ton of group damage unless you're failing and standing in traps.
It might be in the sheet. I'll look. Like I don't even know how frequent they are, but I'll go
depending
look.
on that would be helpful for me because the flaming claws alone are quite a bit of damage as well. Because I think we have to stack to 10 or 11, possibly more than that, to get proper resets.
Because it's like that is also like a 30-second dot, so it's
20 seconds stacking at like 30,000 damage per stack. So if the boss autos at 2 seconds, which most do, we're going to have to stack to 11 in order to clear.
Got it. Yep. Yeah, so tanks are going to be getting trucked this whole fight, but the good news is DPS shouldn't be because there's not a ton of unavoidable damage. The one instance of unavoidable damage is the boss will target like 3 DPS, and it'll pulse fire damage around them. Great time for a DPS personal. And then just walk out of the raid so you're not hurting your friends. So again, this is, I think, a good example of a boss that has like 3 very core mechanics that aren't super hard to understand, but they all hurt. I'm looking forward to Skarn.
Michael Skarn?
Z-Skarn. But yes. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to zoom through Sludge Fist, a.k.a. Magmarax. This is also a space management boss. You can think of it a lot like Fallen Avatar, or a lot like Sludge Fist. Kill the boss before it kills you. If the boss gets to 100 energy, he kills us, similar to Rashok. If he stands in fire, he gains energy, similar to Rashok. So on heroic, 3 people will get marked. They'll spawn fire pools. Take the fight, like the people that get marked go out of the raid. They spawn fire pools, and we need the raid to step out and help soak those pools. So take the circle out, take the damage, and then stand in the pool and make it shrink. On normal and heroic, you can soak these until they're fully gone. But if you soak 25 times, you die. So there's a 20-second debuff that you have to manage as DPS players, which might cause us to still accrue fire pools around the room. So we want to be dropping these on the edge, not in the middle. This was just to show the, like, take it out of the group. But we can stand in them to shrink them, and you want to stand in them quickly, because as soon as they spawn, they start slowly growing. So the longer we let them grow, the more times or like ticks of damage we have to take in order to fully soak them. So that's kind of tricky. On Mythic, the stacks don't expire. So you soak fire, and you can do it 25 times per person in the whole raid, and that's it. So don't put the boss in fire. Soak the fire, make it smaller, and effectively dodge the other mechanics. On Mythic, there's a bigger soak. That bigger soak, so if you will be dropping fire on the sides. They still come out 3 at a time. However, one of the soaks is like a big soak. So on Mythic, the 2 people that have the little soaks go very far. The one person with the big soak goes closer, and the whole raid steps out, or not the whole, like, I think we'll have to split it into 2 because there's a debuff. The raid steps out and soaks that puddle down, because that puddle gets really big otherwise. So we'll have to, it's a stack management and a space management fight. But basically we're rotating it around the room, soaking the big soak, not soaking the little soaks, and killing the boss. Again, if you get to 25 stacks, you just die. So it's your own responsibility to say, I can't soak, I need someone else to soak. And it's everyone's responsibility to manage their own stacks, but we'll assign different soak groups as we go through. On Mythic, you cannot soak the pools fully away. So you can only make them smaller, but you can never make them disappear. So you will eventually run out of space on Mythic. It appears that on normal and heroic, you can truly just keep the platform open. So we'll just be spinning around the room. There's also soaks. Soaks are the name of the game, where, similar to other bosses, he'll make a swirly on the ground. If you don't stand in the swirly, it spawns a new flame puddle at that location. If you soak it, it doesn't spawn a flame puddle. Soaking this does not give you a stack. So it's just ranged will be responsible for those soaks, but the boss will do a roar. It will damage the whole raid, and then people will soak the residual swirlies that spawn from the roar. The boss also has a frontal cone. It's not a predictable frontal cone at tanks. It just goes a direction and does damage, so that you may have to sidestep as a group. And you want to just not get hit by the breath, because the breath pumps. And lastly, it's Razageth again. The boss has a big knockback. In PTR testing, this was like platform level knockback. So you had to do the like P1 Razageth gateway knockback cheese. But because we're spinning around the room, we can't just predictably keep it in one spot. So before each knockback, we'll have to put a gateway down and have folks recognize where it is and do the gateway knock counter to counter it. But we should all have a ton of practice because we're all P1 Razageth gods. This doesn't happen more than once every 2 minutes, so we should be able to gate each one. We won't have to do weird personal ability and all that stuff. But this boss is looking super cool. It's easy to understand mechanics. It's very clearly on a timer. The timer is longer or shorter based on how well we manage our stacks. So we'll have to get comfy with it. But this is just a pure single target, go, 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 burn fight. It's like the sludge fist of this raid.
Out of curiosity, is this going to be the updated fight that's currently in the game, or are you going off of videos? Because I know that there was talk that this boss was potentially reworked.
So I'm going off of the detail following the reworks. On the rework was the breath soaks that happen here. These weren't soaks, and they were just random. So every like minute, the boss would spawn random flame patches, and
Right.
if it put a flame patch where you like, if this was your soak pattern and it put a flame patch over here on Mythic, you're fucked because you can never fully get rid of it, and you don't have enough stacks to keep making that one smaller. So the
Right.
change
There was
is
like doubling up on certain puddles because of like
Right.
where they were spawning. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it could go in old shit, and sometimes it could totally fuck you over, like spawn in the middle, and then you die. So they took the randomness out of it, and they made it preventable with the soaking mechanic, was the rework. I'm not aware
Gotcha.
of further
Okay.
reworks after that, but everything that I've read so far and is available from the resources that I've shared shows that there weren't further changes other than number tuning.
All right. I'll take your word for it. I would assume that I know that there's just been a lot of random information on YouTube
Yeah.
on this one, and
Yeah.
nobody can kind of come to a conclusive. And then something that Blizzard might rework it again. So we might
Who
see a different
knows?
fight when we actually get into the fight, but we'll see.
It might be slightly different for sure. But as of right now, my understanding is the only change from PTR testing is they took the randomness out of it and made it so that if you played well, you could prevent it, which is net
Gotcha.
positive. And then there were questions on how hard the only other potential rework, and I haven't heard anything about this or seen anything on RLE, is they might have decreased the potency of the knockback so that you didn't have to gate it or fly off the side. But I'm not sure if they actually pulled the trigger on that. But that was
Yeah, the
another
knockback
potential
was
feedback
wild.
point. It was platform wide. Like, even if you were all the way over here, you could still get knocked off without major movement cooldowns. So it's truly a like built-in gateway knockback avoidance mechanic. Like, you have to gate. So I think those were the this is a potential change. This is a definite change. But I'm not aware of anything beyond those. We're already a couple minutes over, so I'm going to kind of zoom through Neltharion. Raid plan is kind of fucked. They don't actually have a boss icon, so Skull is the boss. This boss is fairly straightforward. It's boss makes walls. People get knocked back. When you get knocked back through a wall, you break the wall. Like 10 seconds later, the boss makes the wall again. So this whole fight is going to be about making sure we have holes when we need holes, and not getting hit and not getting trapped away from the group as the boss rebuilds the walls. That's like the core mechanic of Neltharion. There's a lot of other things going on, but there's also not a ton of info about the boss. So the P1 pattern is the boss makes a pentagon in the middle of the room, and the edges of those pentagon extend out. The prevailing strategy seems to be take the boss to one side and burn the boss. There's two things that knock back in P1. There's a random DPS get marked with a purple circle or a purple triangle above their head. They'll get knocked back. The boss will also do a big hit between that person and them. So those people want to like move radially away from the raid so that DPS aren't between them and the boss. But you can get knocked through a wall. It seems like you don't really need to, though, unless they change the mechanic, because the only reason that you really need to shatter a wall in P1 is after each tank mechanic, the boss makes a big fire puddle. So it seems like the DPS knockback is really just to tee up P2 and make that a little bit easier. The only other reason is on Mythic, there's damage that will happen. So shatters occur. Someone gets a circle on them. You move out. You make sure people aren't in your circle. You move back in. On Mythic, that does damage not in like a little circle, but to anyone in that person's line of sight. So you'll need DPS players to make a hole. The person with shatter will like loss the whole raid and then come back in. So that's the reason that the DPS mechanics exist. On normal and heroic, it seems like there's truly not a reason for that to happen. So I'm not too worried about the wall breaks. When we do get here on Mythic, line of sight becomes a whole thing. But basically, each tank mechanic, tanks are going to get knocked back super far, so we'll just move clockwise around the room. Tanks will get knocked back through the wall. The whole raid will move through the wall. The boss will make a big fire circle, and that wedge is basically dead. The only other detail that was available from a testing standpoint is in P2. So there's a brief intermission where the boss picks people and corrupts them. Those corrupted players become hostile to the raid. Don't kill your friends. Because those people are the only people that can damage these ads. And these ads are the core mechanic of pattern 2. So the boss will make a triangle of walls in the center, and they'll extend out to the side. There'll be 3 ads in each of the big wedges, or like along each face of the triangle. The hostile players are the only people who can damage those ads. So the hostile players are nuking into the ad. Once the ad shield breaks, those hostile players become friendly again, and the whole raid can damage the ad. So it's burn an ad, go to the next section. Burn an ad, go to the next section. The boss cannot move to the next phase or be damaged below a certain percentage until all 3 ads are dead. So it's save your cooldowns until the ad's attackable, burn the ad. On Mythic, the hostile players will also do shit to the raid, like things they can't avoid, where they'll occasionally cast, like, and this is an example, like a big AoE on the raid or around them. So it's just going to be if you're a hostile player, don't be near your friends. If you're a friendly player, don't be near the hostile people. It's just going to be managing that on top of the other knockbacks from P1 and the shatters. So this is a fight that builds on itself, but the core mechanic is break the walls, kill the ads. In P3, there wasn't any footage of P3 or any like a ton of detail about it, but from what I could gather from the materials out there, in P3, it's basically the boss will make portals instead of walls, and there's a big AoE smash hit that does a ton of damage unless you're standing in a portal, where you do no damage and do no healing when you're standing in the portals, but you also take no damage from the big boss hit. I didn't see any examples of this, but basically it's you stand in a portal. Think Rygalon, right? We'll have a set position. You go stand in your position because after the boss does his big smash, the portals go away. I think that's a Mythic only mechanic, but still. So you can't have 2 people standing in one portal, and you'll eventually run out of portals, so you have to kill the boss before the boss kills you. But there are also little ads that fixate and do damage, and they'll chase you. And the longer they're alive, the more damage they do, kind of like Il'gynoth. So people who aren't fixated will kill the ads, and the whole time we're damaging the boss. I've put a ton of stuff, and I'll take questions on this in a second, but I put a ton of resources in the Aberrus channel. So all of the raid plans that we talked through are in here. I linked a bunch of videos, both Stanky and Ready Check Pull. Pick your favorite style. Have really good content out there. And I also shared a link to the QE Live site, which is what I was just sharing. This has a ton of just like very easy to digest, raid plan-esque visuals for how you would handle stuff. If you basically aren't a big fan of the super visual raid plans or the way that I've conveyed information, you're more than welcome to reference this stuff too. From everything that I've seen, all of this becomes fairly easy to reference. So, but I think we should be fully in sync. I think the only thing I didn't build raid plan wise is if you were to reach 100 energy, the conduit goes fucking crazy and does a bunch of damage. So it's not an auto kill on Rashok. It is an auto kill on Magmarax. But I think that's the only thing that I didn't hit in the raid plans that is in the QE Live stuff. So pick your poison, ask questions. I'm going to be updating the weak aura pack. We do have 2 mandatory weak auras. We have our usual, the like DF raid one, and then I also, back by popular demand, is the Synapse pack. I will be keeping this updated. I will be adding to it. Right now, the only thing in it is the interrupt tracker because there aren't a ton of publicly available weak auras out there. But as promised, I will grow that. So we may have a couple of like import and re-import moments over the next couple of weeks. So keep an ear to the channel. But in the Aberrus channel, there's a lot of stuff that's out there. And then as we tackle each boss and go crazy, we'll also put stuff in here. So lots of moving pieces, but hopefully folks are able to digest the stuff that we've got ahead of raid. I think we'll have some more details out to folks on when we're going into Mythic, what the normal schedule looks like, when Mythic Mondays can and will happen. I know Ferris and Schwab and team, or I forget actually who hit send, but either way, I think it was Ferris, hit send on the updated raid expectations in the raid chat channel, just so that folks have full context. Give these a quick glance through. I think none of this should come as a surprise, but we may end up adding a couple of Mythic days as well. So just to put it on everyone's radar. So with that, any questions on Neltharion or the upcoming raid or anything that you saw in the expectations post?
I have a question, Rev.
Yeah.
If I learn about a strat on one of these fights that is on its way, to live and has not been tested all the way through yet.
Yeah.
For instance, if I have a friend who is working on their own materials or whatever, or I hear about some juicy tech, how should I communicate that?
Use your channel. I know we're piloting the channels. I think mentioning something in raid chat for folks is good, but making sure that you're bringing it up so that the officers are aware and so that we can adapt is going to be the biggest way. We have a super talkative group at the start of every tier, which is awesome, but it also makes it super hard. Sorry, I hit my mute button. It also makes it super hard to track any like hot and emergent strats. So use your individual chat channel. Everyone should have one. If you don't have one, please tell us ASAP. If you don't know what I'm talking about, reach out to any of the officers, because I don't think we missed anyone, but we are only human.
I know you had mentioned there's like priority for people getting specific gear.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a public list that people can see who gets priority?
Yeah, we'll share high level ordering for tier. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes into tier and trinkets and everything. So, we'll make folks aware of kind of what that initial ordering is, and then vaults and different things will change that. But similar to last year, we're going to be using a set order for sort of how some of that stuff gets allocated out, because and especially for some of the really high value items in the raid, like class trinkets and things like that, where except for a few niche situations, they're BIS for everyone. So it's going to be really important for a couple of things. Is one, everyone to kind of go in eyes wide open. These are going to be super rare items. We're not going to be swimming in class trinkets. But this is also a moment where normal and heroic versions of those are super valuable, because you can upgrade them to mythic quality, which is awesome. Not the exact same item level, but at least mythic equivalent item level for the first few bosses. So doing those early bosses is going to be super helpful on lower difficulties. And two, certain specs might be, and I think Taco, you were hitting on this earlier, certain specs might only be good with a class trinket. So be aware of what people are playing with your gear, and like make sure you're simming and resimming and constantly checking up on yourself so that you're not playing the wrong spec that might be dependent on something that you don't yet have. So there's a lot that goes into loot allocation, but yes, we will share sort of what that upfront tier prio list is, noting that it may change, it may shift based on how things shake out over the first couple of weeks.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
a little note to that: crafting gear is going to be heavily important this tier since it goes to 447 also, so you don't want to fall behind on that.
Yes, make sure you're checking your class discords, figure out what the best embellishments and all that is going to be, as well as just crafting to replace pieces that you might not yet have loot on. The token system can be confusing if you don't yet know what you're supposed to be farming for these first few weeks. You're looking to make your Shadow Flame upgrade conduit, so you want the Shadow Flame fragments. You can get 2 per week. Make sure that you're getting those. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you haven't yet done the new zone stuff, let us know ASAP so we can walk you through it.
Another question.
Yeah.
Maybe it was said before, but I don't know if it was expected. But if we're kind of like trying to essentially gear everyone out with tier, if you get tier in your first vault, are you expected to take it?
Except for very extenuating circumstances, yes. If you have the ability to take tier, almost universally will be taking tier. If you have questions about like, hey, I got tier, but I also got this other item, also just ask questions. And again, that's why those chat channels are out there. But similar to last tier, almost universally, if you have access to a tier slot, even if it's from a lower difficulty in your vault, somewhere where you don't yet have tier, you're expected to take that. But again, if you do have questions about your particular vault on a given week, you can always just ask.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Good questions.
With the creation catalyst, does that change things?
So I know it's available sooner, and you accrue them naturally. I don't think it will change that expectation, at least for the first few vaults, but it'll help us fill out where folks have gotten unlucky and actually get us to the point where we're relevant faster, and give us a way to leverage those high item level pieces that we might get from higher difficulties. So as of yet, we're not expecting it to change, but I'll let Ferris jump in there and if there's something that I'm missing as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, unless you've heard otherwise, I think that we're still not expecting it to be like decisive at the beginning. And luckily, tier is going to be. I mean, the real choke point is going to be these cricket, but tier is going to be like pretty plentiful at the start, especially for folks who are coming to multiple difficulties and all that.
Yep.
The last I heard is that most guilds are expecting most of their raiders to be on 4-piece by the end of the second week.
Yes.
Doing heroic and normal.
Yeah, because everyone's guaranteed 1 piece, right? If we kill the last boss.
Right.
It's like a quest, I think.
Correct.
What do you mean if?
Okay. Well, we know nothing about the last boss, so we'll have to kind of wait and see. If it's a Raz situation, I know we didn't get AOTC until a couple of weeks in.
Really normal, though.
So that will definitely be a thing that we prioritize on normal potentially for the first week. So yes. But hey, I really appreciate everyone's time. I know I went about 15 minutes long. We got started about 5 minutes late. So appreciate everyone's buy-in and feedback. I'm going to hit stop on the recording unless there's any other last-minute questions here. And I'll start the upload process for the folks who weren't able to join us. That doesn't mean everyone has to leave the channel, but just stop in the recording.